Levi Brackman here with Truth, Jewish Wisdom for today. This is a special episode of the podcast. It's Hadren on Bava Metzia. In Daf Yomi, we finished Bava Metzia today, and as has become my tradition, I do a Hadren on the Masechta when we finish it. And the Hadren, for those who don't know, this is named after the prayer which is said when one finishes a Masechta, where we say that Hadran Alach, we're going to return to you. We never just finish a Masechta and never return to it, but since it's part of the Torah, and the Torah is a book that we study as Jews over and over again, we promise that we're going to return and restudy that Masechta again. So, as part of that, a summary, if you like, of the Masechta is done, and a conversation or Dvar Torah, or a little bit of a discussion around some of the main core ideas of the Masechta is done, and I do that on my podcast as well. So here is the Hadran, my Hadran, on Masechtas Bava Metzia. Now, I was thinking, what can I talk about? There are so many different ideas found in Masechtas Bava Metzia. The whole idea of private property and property which belongs to me and doesn't belong to you, and what if I get into a dispute whose property it is, what if I owe you something or you claim that I owe you something, I claim I don't owe you something. What all these different conversations around property and ownership and business is all discussed in great length in the Masechtas Bava Metzia, and I could have chosen any of these ideas, and there's a tremendous amount of lumdus and logic and deep discussion about different reasons for why the law can be this way or can be that way. And I decided, instead of going to all those well-trodden sugyas, portions of the Talmud found in this Masechta, I wanted to choose something which I just found very, very interesting and instructive. So here goes. There is at least 2 times in this tractate where it talks about the eye. And there's a concept of the eye in terms of Ayin Hara, the evil eye. And then there's also, in terms of the eye, something which is seen. And I think that these things are related, and let me explain. We find on 42a, Mem Beis Amud Aleph, a piece of the Talmud which I have actually brought up also in another episode related to the Torah portion. I'm going to give a slightly different take on that. Before I get into that, there's this really fascinating piece of business advice which is given in the Talmud, which says, Rabbi Yitzchak says, a person should always separate his money, net worth, if you like, into 3 different categories. In other words, a person should have his money invested in 3 different categories. Shlish b'karka, a third should be in real estate. Shlish b'pragmatia, a third should be in merchandise. Or shlish tachas yodai, and a third he should have in cash. He should have tachas yodai under his hands, in other words, available for cash. And the Maharsha explains that the reason for this is as follows. Initially, you want it in real estate. Well, real estate doesn't necessarily make a lot of money, but it's very safe. It's your safest investment. No one can really steal your real estate. It's there. No one can take it away. But maybe it's not as profitable. Then the next level up is in merchandise. Merchandise is much more profitable. In today's day and age, merchandise might be less profitable, you might argue, than real estate, because real estate you can actually turn into apartments, etc., office buildings, and you can actually make quite a bit of money off that, and it's a passive investment for many people. But in those days, merchandise was something which you could go and take from one place to another place and sell it for a higher value, and therefore you could make more money on it, especially if you were doing it the whole time you were buying and selling, then you could actually make a lot more money off it and consistently make money off it. Today, that might be saying you want a third of your money in a tech company or something which yields much, much higher returns if it's successful. And then you should have a third in cash. And the reason why a third in cash is because it could be that you have a business deal which shows up and you want to have cash available to take advantage of that business deal. So you should always have a third of your net worth in cash available to be able to invest in a business deal or in an opportunity, for example. The people with cash are the ones who are always able to go out and buy the distressed assets. And if you don't have cash, you can't buy them. So you should always have a third of your money in cash so you can actually invest in those distressed assets or those distressed business opportunities when they become available. So this is a bit of business advice which we find in the Talmud. And then it jumps straight into the next bit, which I wanted to focus on. Ve'omer Rabbi Yitzchak. And Rabbi Yitzchak, the same Rabbi Yitzchak giving business advice, he gives another piece of advice. And he says, Ein habracha mitzuye ela b'davar hasamoy min ha'ayin. Blessing does not rest only on a thing which is hidden from the eye. And as it says, Shnemal, like it says in the pasuk in Deuteronomy 28, verse 8, Yitzav Hashem itcha es habracha b'asomecha. That the God will command the blessing with you in your storehouses. And it understands the idea of asomecha to be something which is somoy, something which is hidden. Comes from the word somoy, asomecha, somoy, something which is hidden. And then there's another view or another way of saying the same thing. Tana Devei Yishmael, the house of Yishmael, they learned it as follows: that a blessing is not found only in a thing that the eye doesn't rule over it. And it quotes exactly the same verse. Then it goes on to say the various blessings that you're going to make in the time that you're collecting the harvest. It says that if you've already measured and you've already counted all of the crop, make a blessing and pray to God that you should have success in your crop. He says that is a worthless blessing because that blessing is not found not on something which is weighed, not on something which is counted, and not on something which is measured, only on something which is hidden from the eye. And then it quotes the exact same blessing. Yisav Hashem itcha es habracha b'asamech. We discussed in a previous episode that once you've already finished all your work, you can't start asking for blessings in it. Once you're still in the planning stages, you're still in the working stages, you can still put more effort in. You can ask God to make your effort successful. But if you've already completed it, you've done all the work, what is there to have additional blessing in? So that's the way we understood it in a different episode. I want to look at it in a slightly different light here. And in the light of another really interesting part of Masechtas Bava Metzia found in Daf Kuf Zayin Omid Beis 107b, where it has this really interesting part of the Talmud which I want to share. So it says in Dvarim Perek Zayin Pasuk Tesvav, Deuteronomy chapter 7 verse 15, it says, V'heisi Hashem mimcha kol choli, and God will take away from you all sickness. Omar Rav, so Rav says, what is this sickness? What does it mean? Zu ayin. That is the eye. What does it mean, the eye? So it's taken to mean that is God's going to take away from you the Ayin Hara, the evil eye. Rav Latameh, Rav goes according to his reasoning, and it tells a story about Rav. The Rav Sadik Levei Kivrei. Rav went once upon a time to the cemetery, and Ovid might Ovid. He did what he did in the cemetery. And Rashi says, what does he do there? He had this way in which he could talk to the dead, and he was able to then figure out why people died. And Omar, he said, Tishin v'tisha, 99 ba'ayin ra, died because of the evil eye. Ve'echad b'derech eretz, and one just from the regular way. So 99 of the 100 people who he did his research on, of these dead people, they died because of the evil eye. And only one of them died just because of a regular way, just because he got old and got sick or whatever, but not because of the evil eye. First of all, it's interesting that Rav would go to the cemetery and he was able to do his data collection and try and figure out how people died. And there's a conversation about what did he actually do. Some people say that he planted things on top of the graves and he wanted to see whether they would actually blossom, and if they blossomed, then he knew that the person just died in the regular way. But if it didn't blossom, then he knew that the Ayin Hara, the evil eye, was still there. Be that as it may. What's interesting here is this idea of the evil eye. That the evil eye is such a powerful concept within Judaism. I want to go back now to the first piece of Gemara, the first sugya that we mentioned, in Daf Mem Beis, which you talked about, Ayin Hara, And some people seem to think that actually means that you can only have blessing can only rest. Actually, the Mashar says this only on something which doesn't have the evil eye. And any time when something becomes known, then the evil eye can be attracted towards it, and then you don't have blessing. So something which can be well known, something which is already counted, something which is already measured, which is weighed, now it's known, and the evil eye can be attracted towards it, and therefore you don't have blessing on it. Whereas if no one knows what it is, how much it is, then the evil eye is not attracted to it. There are those who argue, it can't be talking about that. Why? Because even if you count it, only you know about it. It doesn't mean you've made it public to everybody. Only you've known about it. So therefore, how would the eye be attracted to something which only you know? The Zohar, the Kabbalistic text, the magnum opus of the Kabbalah, when it talks about this type of thing, that blessing doesn't rest on something which is known and something which is measured, it relates it to the evil eye. And it talks about the Sitra Achara, the other side, that when something is known, the other side, the Sitra Achara, can now be drawn to it. Whereas when it's not known, then the Sitra Achra, the other side, is not drawn to it. The other evil side, the dark side, the side of impurity is talking about, that's the other side. And therefore, if that side is not attracted to it, then holiness can be attracted to it. And therefore, you end up with blessings attracted towards it. But as soon as it's known, then the Sitra Achra knows it too. The other side, the evil side, also knows it too. So it shouldn't be something which is known. So according to that explanation, then it doesn't matter if only the individual knows about it. The individual knows about it, therefore now the Sitra Achra can also know about it. So therefore, the Talmud 42a, which talks about Ayin Hara, that is talking about the Ayin Hara as well. As soon as the Ayin Hara can get to it, the Sitra Achra can get to it, the other side can get to it, then blessing can't get to it. So it sounds very hocus pocus, and it sounds very enchanted. There's these different powers which work on things, and if it's not known, then you can have blessing, but if it's known, you can have blessing, etc., etc. I always like to kind of delve in and try and figure out what is the wisdom teaching here? What is it really trying to tell us? And because what can happen is that you can get all caught up into this enchanted world, and people, especially in the time of the Talmud, they lived in an enchanted world, and you can say, well, this enchanted world doesn't talk to me today in 2024. So I try and decipher the wisdom from the enchantment, the truths, if you like, from the truth. And to me, it actually comes out very, very straightforward and simple. That the idea of Ayin Hara, the evil eye, and blessing not resting on something which the eye can see, it's the idea of the importance that one attaches to something. When you count something and you measure it, you're attaching a certain type of importance to it. And you're saying that this thing that I can measure, whether it's my money, whether it's my net worth, whether it's a third of my net worth, which is in real estate, and a third in merchandise, a third in cash, or whether I'm talking about my produce that I'm now counting at the end to make sure how much I have, sell it, etc., or whether it's revenue at the end of the month. All these things we're counting, and when we count them, we're saying they're really important. And when we say they're really important, what happens? Net worth can also mean self-worth. For some people, net worth and self-worth are very much intertwined with each other. They confuse the two, net worth and self-worth. And for a lot of people, you're working very hard in order to achieve certain financial goals and certain other kind of career-based goals, professional goals, and they become really, really important. And you want to make sure that you can actually quantify your success in it. So you're measuring it. As a matter of fact, I've brought up this book before. There's a book called Measure What Matters. And the argument of that book is that you can't know whether you've achieved something unless you're able to measure it. Once you've measured it, you know that you've achieved it. If you know what you're measuring, you know whether you've hit that goal or not. If you don't know what you're measuring, you don't know whether you've hit that goal. So You need to be able to measure something. So measuring something shows that you've put importance to it. Now, as soon as you put importance to something, your mind thinks it's important. You think it's really important as well. And therefore now you can confuse yourself thinking that it's actually important. To me, what the Talmud's trying to say here is, Ayin Hara ela al davar hasamu min ha'ayin. Blessing is only resting on things which you can't measure. And the things which are really important in life, they're things which other people can't see. They aren't those tangible things. Those aren't the things which are your true blessings. Blessings rest. Your true blessings are not things which are measurable necessarily the way you measure actual tangible achievements of net worth, of professional achievements, of material achievements. That's not what true blessings come from. True blessings rest in things which are not measurable, things which people can't see. In your relationships with people, in your relationships with God, in the good deeds that you do, in the quality of your personality, in your spirituality, in the kind of character that you are, how much you've refined yourself, how much you've bettered yourself, in your relationship with your family, with your spouse, with your friends, with your community. Those are not things you can necessarily count or measure, and they're not things that you can see physically. Those are all things where blessing truly rests. If you want to find some kind of satisfaction, some kind of peace in your life, a sense of being truly blessed, they don't come from these things that you measure. They do not come from your financial success. They don't come from how much produce you had at the end of the harvest period. So if this is the way you read it, that where does blessing come from? Blessing comes from these intangible things, not from the tangible things that you can measure. Now we can understand what Rav was saying when he went to the cemetery. What Rav was saying is that I went and I looked why people died. And he says people died because of the ayin, he says. When you live a life where what you're focused on are these material achievements, these successes related to business, successes related to your produce. Well, that's what it's talking about here. Your business, how much you can measure. You live a very stressful life because you're constantly running after a number and you never feel you get that. That anyone who's been in business knows that this is a goalpost which changes the whole time. I remember as a kid thinking, if only I had $1,000 in my bank account, I would be happy. And then you end up with $1,000 in your bank account, and you want $2,000, you want $10,000, you want $20,000, you want $100,000. On and on. It never stops. If that's your focus, it's never going to be enough. If your focus is what the eye can see, it's never going to be enough. And it's going to catch up with you. You're not going to feel fulfilled. And in the end, the stress of it is going to take your life. And that's 99% of people. Only 1 out of 100 dies the regular way, dies with inner peace, doesn't die because of the eye. So I think that's what it's saying here. And this, to me, in Masechtas Bava Metzia, which is all about business, and it's all about, this is my property, this is what I owe you, this is what you owe me, and all these other concepts that are found related to doing business and related to who do these things belong to. Two people come into Beis Din holding on a talis. One says, I found it. The other one says, I found it. One says the whole thing's mine. The other one says the whole thing's mine. This is what the whole thing's about. The last chapter talks about what happens if you're renting a attic from somebody and the floor breaks. Who has to pay for the floor? Who has to fix which bit? These are all things which are related to things which I own and I don't own. But in all of that, you have this message. And that message is that none of this is really, it might be really important because you need to have these categories and you need to know who owns what in order for a society to properly function. However, if this becomes the most important thing to you, then that is something which the eye rests upon. That ends up being Ayin Hara, a negative eye. Negative eye in the sense that you end up thinking that this is the most important thing in life, and you don't realize that really what is truly blessed and blessing your life really will only rest on the things which are not tangible, hasamim min ha'ayin, which are hidden from the eye, the things which you can't necessarily measure, the things which are not measurable in the same way that you would measure all your tangible things, how much produce you have, or how much business you have, or how much money you've made. These things, the immeasurable things, the priceless things, that is where blessing truly rests in your life. And only 1 out of 100 people who truly get that and live their lives accordingly. And therefore, to me, the actual message of this tractate is that whilst you have to do business, and that's really important in order to have enough money to live, and it's important in order to be able to have a functioning society to know whose property is whose. But don't let that confuse you in thinking that that is the most important thing, and that is the thing which you need to measure most, because blessings truly rest on the things which are immeasurable rather than the things that are measurable. So that is my blessing to everyone who's listening to this as we finish Masechtas Bava Metzia and we go into Bava Basra, is to remember that blessings truly rest only on the things which are hidden from the eye, the things which are not measurable, those things which have a qualitative effect on one's life rather than a quantitative effect on one's life. Relationships, spirituality, and connectivity with others and with God. And with that I say, Hadran alach, Masechtas Bava Metzia, V'daitan alach. Thank you so much for joining me with this, and till next time.